Hello and welcome. So my name is Susanne Tarkowski. I'm the founder and CEO of BITNATION. BITNATION is the world's first virtual nation that is built on a blockchain. And we're currently working on building our blockchain jurisdiction, which is called Pangea. So tonight I would like you to basically take you through Pangea, both the end user view of it, how it works for people, what it does, and also a little bit on the technical part, technical components of it. So let me share the slides with you. 1 second. So Pangea, we call it the Internet of Sovereignty, and you will understand why, because it is actually truly like an internet, because it's a peer-to-peer meshnet protocol, which makes people self-sovereign, not just from a governance standpoint or a social standpoint, but actually from a technological standpoint. But I will get back to that in a little bit. So if we look at what a government does, right now a government tend to do everything and nothing, right? They do everything from building roads to education to health services, what have you. But that's not always the case. If we look at what a government actually does in reality, you can basically strip it down to two things: security and jurisdiction. And security and jurisdiction has more and more become the same thing, as more and more of our assets are digital and more of our identities are digital. That doesn't mean that Pangea only works in the digital world, which I will explain later. There can also be hyper-local peer-to-peer apps for local governance solutions. But basically, if we want to replace nation states, throughout competing them on their core functionality, then we have to build a jurisdiction, and that is what will make them meaningless. So basically, the core functionalities in Pangea is the ability to create binding P2P smart contracts, and the front end is a decentralized chat app, resolve disputes through a peer-to-peer market for arbitration services, and create and join virtual nations and communities. So these are the fundamental things we're focusing on. So if you look at what a jurisdiction is, so basically it's the ability to, you have the code of law, the ability to either choose one code of law, or some jurisdiction have several codes of law. And you can also create your own codes, right? If you wanted to use a smart contract as a code of law, for instance, or you can choose Sharia law or common law or civil law or whichever you want to. The ability to resolve a dispute attached to a contract, for instance, through using a human arbitrator that you choose from a list of arbitrators, or you can use a third-party application as well, like Claris or Perjury or whatever. Or you can also, in your contract, refer to a legacy jurisdictions where arbitration will take place in case there is a problem with the contract. And then we have the enforcement layer. So when you create a contract, you want to know that you can also enforce it. So the built-in enforcement mechanism in Pangea is the reputation system. That is basically what motivates people to behave well. So in comparison to a nation-state jurisdiction, people will behave well because they are afraid of being put in a cage to go to jail. But in Pangea, they behave well because they get positive feedback from behaving well through augmented reputation. You can also, in a contract, you can also have other methods, like for instance, an escrow that holds everyone's money until all the contracts are fulfilled. And again, you can also choose legacy mechanism, like resort to traditional legacy jurisdiction enforcement methods. But this whole, it's all done through, if you look at a trend throughout the world, most contracts, most business agreements today are done through chat applications like WeChat or WhatsApp, etc., in emerging markets like Brazil or China or India, etc. And that trend is only growing. Yeah? And it's intuitive when you think about it. When all contracts starts with a conversation between two or more parties. So you start with a conversation saying, I want this, I want that, blah, blah, this is how much it costs, this is what we expect, this is when we want it. So it makes so much sense to make a smart contract through a chat, basically. And then the chat instantly becomes Solidity code that gets sent to IPFS and then interpreted by our bot Lucy that use the data to send out non-tradable reputation tokens to people who create contracts, who execute contracts, and who resolves disputes that are attached to certain contracts. So basically, to just describe, I'm not going to go into this in detail because I know it's a bit kind of boring and technical, but I just want to quickly describe the tech stack. So if you start looking from the bottom, it's a mesh network that we have built mainly on IPFS, that is a communications protocol, and it's also it's a delay-tolerant mesh protocol that is also resistant against quantum computing and other emerging threats. And on top of that, you have all the core things, so like ID and reputation, smart contracts operations, Lucy and the Oracle, the wallets, storage and search and so forth. And it's important to remember that this is all blockchain agnostic. So right now we're working with Ethereum, but we are planning to integrate Rootstock, the Rootstock protocol next year, so that people can run executor contracts on Bitcoin. And in the future, we can integrate others, let's say Tezos or EOS or BitLaTice or whichever else kind of evolves as an interesting option. And then above that, you have the actual end user functionalities. So the choice of the code of law, the smart contracts themselves. It's a free market for smart contracts, right? And the choice of arbitrators and witnesses. And then after that, you have the API. And on top of the API, anyone can build their own bots and dApps and what we call caps, which is basically smart contracts that are built to be shared and bought and sold. So those can be anything. Currently, there are a few people already building. So one, for instance, is a peer-to-peer dApp for local security services, peer-to-peer security services. There is another dApp that has been building for a while, which is for peer-to-peer opt-in basic income and so forth. So that's really something that we want to empower people to do to build their own governance applications. And if you look at where all the trends are going, as I mentioned previously, more and more people are using mobile chat application to do this. And if you look at the global market, so a lot of people lives in the System D economy where they don't necessarily use traditional services such as, incorporated companies or paying taxes or any of those things. There are over 2 billion unbanked adults, and 80% of the world's population lives in frontier and emerging markets. So why do these numbers matter? They matter because we have designed the Pangea jurisdiction to be especially helpful in those situations. Because why would you choose a government that can't anyways be enforced because it's too bureaucratic and too weak and too bureaucratic and too messy and expensive and incompetent, when you have a very easy option on your cell phone where you can make any agreement in the world at any time with anyone you want and enforce it in a sustainable way. So this isn't exactly new. We started BITNATION in 2014. We did the first world citizenship ID on the blockchain, the first marriage on the blockchain, the first refugee emergency response on the blockchain, the first birth certificate, the first land title, and many other pilots. We also did in 2015, end of 2015, we built a public notary in partnership with the e-residency program of Estonia. And that has since been used by thousands of people to do things like wills and birth certificates and business deals and loan agreements, things like that. And so we know there is a huge demand for it. But what we learned throughout that process was that to be really interesting, it should have an enforcement mechanism like the reputation system, etc. And the contracts should be dynamic so that they can hold money, so that they can send out money, etc. Which is why it needs to be basically a smart contract jurisdiction, right? So that is why it's now evolving into Pangea. But the first iteration of Pangea was actually built in 2015. We released the first version in 2015, a second one in 2016, and then we found the right technology stack and the right team to do it. And so in 2017, we started building on this version 0.3, which will be released in a few weeks now. And we're really, we feel really sure that this is a much more interesting way to do it. Just as an aside, we also won the Next Expert Award this year for the best idea for the refugee emergency response. We did. Other winners of the UNESCO Net Expert Award has been things like Twitter, Airbnb, etc. So that was cool. Right now, we have about 10,000 citizens. We have over 2,000 people on our Slack channel contributing. We have written over hundreds of thousands of lines of code. We have over more than 200 embassies and consulates around the world, and over 5,000 contracts that's been notarized. This is how we have gained all the experience necessary to do what we are currently doing. And this is why we know there is a demand for it.
Before nations, before borders, there was the Pangaea supercontinent. Since then, the world has been divided by tectonic shifts, widening oceans, and stifling politics. Nation-states are crumbling under the weight of local and global challenges that they seem incapable of solving. Rather than embracing a borderless world and increasing personal freedoms, governments and multilateral organizations have overseen a surge in bureaucracy, protectionism, and ever greater intrusions into our personal lives. To prevent a drift towards tyranny, we need drastic change. Pangaea is BITNATION's decentralized jurisdiction platform. Using Pangaea, you can build voluntary nations, agree contracts, and resolve disputes with other citizens, and access the services you need. This is our vision of jurisdiction as a service, a global market for governance services. The Pangaea Arbitration Token, or PAT, is an Ethereum-based in-app token that powers the Pangaea platform. When you create a contract, complete a contract, or resolve a dispute on Pangea, you receive non-tradable reputation tokens through Lucy, our AI bot. Accumulating reputation tokens earns you tradable PAT tokens. This ensures that you can't buy a good reputation or acquire it through popularity, but if you earn one, you will be rewarded. Imagine a world where people can freely choose which voluntary nations and jurisdictions they want to be part of. A world where voluntary nations offer a choice of services under their own laws and policies and compete for citizens in a free market that rewards good governance. You too can be part of the future of governance by joining the Pangea token sale. Welcome to the Internet of Sovereignty. Welcome to Pangea.
So I hope that gave you a good overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions about BitNation or Pangea you might have. This is interesting, but feels very idealistic in nature, even utopic to some extent. How, if any, so far has it been used to solve real-world issues? I don't think it's particularly utopian at all, because people do peer-to-peer agreements every single day. And most disputes today are actually solved in local courts, private courts, or just solved peer-to-peer. So having a system that empowers that and that makes it easier is actually, it's extremely realistic, boringly realistic, in fact. Second question, how enforceable are those contracts in traditional courts? So in most traditional courts, in most countries in the world, if you have an agreement with someone and you have some proof of that agreement, whether it's an email and in some jurisdiction even just a verbal agreement can be enough in court. So having something on an immutable public ledger is obviously much more provable in court. And we have some examples of our things having been used in legacy jurisdiction as well. How this helps me buy and sell land if I become part of a virtual nation. Okay, so let me first explain one thing. So being part, you can do agreements on Pangea regardless if you are part of a virtual nation or not. You don't have to be part of any nation to conduct agreements. So to buy and sell land, so that's something that you would do in a chat with one or more people, and probably for a third-party application that is specialized on the particular land agreement, right? So, so basically, you would both agree on the land, on an amount, refer to your code of law, refer to your dispute mechanism, resolution mechanism, and then basically the contract gets executed on Ethereum, and that's it. It's a very simple and fast process. How will it compete with real-world nations and its regulations? Well, it competes because it's, several thousands of times cheaper and faster and more secure and more private, and it's also free and opt-in. It's kind of like asking, how does email compete with the postal office? Great to see another woman leader in this field. Thank you, Andy. Right back at you. Explain more. I guess the way the video made feel is why I mentioned Ethiopic idealistics. Thanks for the explanation. You're welcome. And B, how do we get more women involved in this evolution? I think that's a good question, actually. I don't think women are inherently non-technical, but there is certainly kind of a surplus of men in the crypto environment at large. But I think this sort of services that makes it more tangible in everyday life will change that, really. And I can see it changing. I think there are already a lot more women now than it was just a few years ago. Can you please talk more when it comes to jurisdiction as a service? Okay, so if you look at jurisdiction, there are certain things that it contains. So the ability to choose one or several codes of law, the ability to enforce your contract, and the ability to resolve disputes attached to your contract. Those are basically the three pillars of a jurisdiction. So all of those, so nation states provide jurisdiction, but they are not the only ones providing jurisdiction. Like, for instance, some cities provide jurisdiction. There are also kind of intrastate jurisdictions like international courts, etc. So jurisdiction is not necessarily attached to a nation state, right? So basically, jurisdiction is very much something you can offer as a service. So think about it as jurisdiction as a box. When you break down all the components into something comprehensible that you can easily package and sell and fork. Let's say if you would start a city, a special economic zone, for instance, or an intentional community in your neighborhood, you could easily just fork it, or just on BitNation, on Pangea, create a jurisdiction for yourself, out of the box jurisdiction, exactly how you want it, with the codes of law you want, with the enforcement mechanism you want, decision mechanism you want, whether it's democracy or holacracy or autocracy or whatever it might be, right? So why it hasn't been done before is a mystery, really, because it should be done. I definitely think we have already seen that there is a big market for it. And right now, actually, it's interesting. We're working with some people from Catalonia who wants to start their own Catalonia 2.0, because obviously they are not very fond of the government in Madrid, but neither do they want war, a violent war. So they think it's a good idea to create competitive options in the ether that anyone can join and leave as they wish without the need for violence or war. And same with Venezuela, actually. We are getting contacted by activists all over the world who want to set up their own nations and jurisdictions. Okay, so next question. Do you know Holochain? Yes, I've heard of it. From what I understand is that the guy who is behind it created a previous project that was kind of more like an art project in a way. So I'm not sure if Holochain is an art project or not, or if it's actually intended as a technology to be real. But I think there are a couple of kind of almost post-blockchain technologies right now out there, like Tangle and Bitlattice and maybe Holochain, that are really interesting, and that in the next 5 years will certainly be worth taking a very hard look into. Okay, next question. Are virtual nation passports a possibility anytime soon? Okay, so when you use the term passports, that means a passport specifically means a travel document. So you can use, so we have a blockchain ID, right? And we specifically choose to call it an ID rather than a passport because we can't guarantee that it can be used as a travel document. And we don't want people to get in trouble if they try to use it as a travel document. However, that being said, a lot of people are using our ID, especially the refugee ID, when we did that back in the days, as a travel, de facto travel document. So, in my ideal vision, we wouldn't need passports. We would just need IDs. So I think that's where we're going, basically trying to decrease the need for passports and replacing them with IDs instead. Does that sound reasonable? Okay, so the only example I can give you right now is what happened during the refugee crisis in 2015 and 2016 in Europe. So we created refugee IDs, and the way we did it, because there are laws in the European Union saying that if people can prove that they have close family members, like children or parents in another country, they have a greater ability to travel to that country and to apply for asylum. So we created a mini web of trust, basically, where family members have to confirm each other, right? So basically, that's how it worked. So basically, through being able to prove that they had close family members in, let's say, the neighboring country, they had more ease to obtain, to get through the border, to be able to reunite with their families. So that's the only known example I'm aware of where it has worked as an actual travel document. But I know there are other people doing tests in the Caribbean right now, who are on boats in the Caribbean, and they're also trying to test it as a travel document. There are some voluntarily undocumented people who are using it as a replacement, and they are basically testing the ground, testing the jurisdictions to see where it will be accepted, where it won't, etc. So, I think ultimately, it's gonna depend on the software adoption. If everyone is using the ID and reputation system, it's gonna be acknowledged by everyone. It's gonna be too hard to ignore and too unpractical to ignore, in kind of the same way, even the postal office is using email now, right? Or banks are starting to adopt Bitcoin and blockchain. So I think really it's just peer-to-peer mass adoption that is going to make the difference. So unless you have something else to suggest as a method. Also, I want to say make one more point about using the idea as a travel document. So the idea with Pangea is that you should be able to choose your own governance service providers wherever you live in the world, because as great as it sounds to travel and to have a world without borders, it's not suitable for everyone. Everyone doesn't want to go and live somewhere else in the world because maybe you have to learn a new language, you have to be far away from your friends and family. It's time and money, cost and time consuming to move somewhere, etc. Maybe you want to just be able to choose the governance services from your phone, regardless where you are in the world, right? So imagine if, for instance, if we were in, let's say, Sweden, we could only be on Pinterest, but not Facebook or LinkedIn or Gmail. Or if we were in Russia, we could only be on LinkedIn, but not on Facebook. Or if we had to travel to, China to be on WeChat, for instance, or we could only be, on WhatsApp if we were in Brazil. That would be absurd. We would never accept that with something as simple as internet platforms. Why do we expect that with something as important and central in our lives as governance services, like security jurisdiction? It doesn't make any sense to me. So actually, much more important than making the idea travel document, I think, is removing the need for travel altogether, so that people can choose whatever they want, wherever they are, regardless of geographical location. And often when I say these things, people say, "Oh, well, that's all very virtual, and but we also have a local reality," and that is true. But when you think about the Pangea jurisdiction, that's just a base platform, basically a base jurisdiction. But on top of it, people can build hyper-local applications. So say, for instance, you could build an application for trash collection peer-to-peer trash collection in Bangalore, for instance, or for peer-to-peer security in Mogadishu, or for whatever you want, right? Or defense against supervillains, peer-to-peer defense against supervillains in Amsterdam, or what have you. So it's both much more global and much more local at the very same time. And those, as I said during the presentation, those are applications that are already being built. It's not just something abstract for the future. They are being actively worked on. And also, as a last remark, we're doing a limited pre-sale right now of our token, PAT, Pangea Arbitration Token, which powers the reputation system on Pangea. And it's available through Bitcoin Swiss. And you can find the link if you visit our website, bitnation.co and tsc.bitnation.co. Then we will do a public sale later on. Thank you all very much for all your questions and for looking at the talk, and see you very soon on Pangea.